Hey everyone, it's Andrzej on Software. In the previous episode, I told you about the story in which I wrote a Ruby script to help people finding other people who share the same talents or similar talents. And I told you that my next coding session would be about trying to make it available on Heroku or deploy it to somewhere. While I started coding, I realized another thing, and here a small explanation. I like to have short coding sessions, like 1 hour or half an hour or 2 hours, but I'm always focused on the fact that it should be deliverable. So someone could benefit from the fact that I did that, and it shouldn't be the programmer. So what I realized just after starting, and it changed my goal, it reduced my goal, is that there is a smaller step I can make. And this is another thing I believe in. I believe that the smaller step you can make in bringing new features or improving the application, the better. If the small step makes sense and is consistent with all the use cases, and it does bring some value. So my goal was to deploy it to Heroku so that other people can also use the script. Maybe not all the users, but maybe some other moderators. And then I realized that actually the next step would be to help me use this application better. So instead of running the script, instead of running it from the IDE, for example, which I do right now because it's just a whole suite of tests, it would be still a value to have a local Rails application, a web application, which whenever someone asks me to generate a report, I can go there, open the form, type the name, and have this the data report generated. And this is a smaller step because I don't have to bother with Heroku just yet. Maybe Heroku will be the next step. So I did that. It took me overall less than 40 minutes. And what I did was, in the directory where I kept the Ruby script, which consisted only from 4 files, so 2 files with the code and 2 test files and 1 file with the CSV. So in the same directory, I generated a Rails application. And that was one kind of explicit decision I made, that I don't want those Ruby files that I wrote before, I don't want them to be part of the Rails application. So it's actually on the other way around. The Rails application is just one detail of this application. Obviously, it's a big detail here, but it's a detail. Ideally, probably there will be the same, I would have a new subdirectory for the current files and then a subdirectory for Rails. Right now, it's a flat list of files which were here before and a new directory called WebApp. I just called it WebApp and I generated Rails new. And after Rails new, I made sure that localhost 3000 just works. And then I thought, okay, I need two pages. I need people/search and people/results. So I generated routes, wrote the routes using the match Rails routes method. Then I wrote I used this technique of, refreshing the web app and see what's the exact exception, and then add the Rails code. That's my being test-driven, more like exception-driven using Rails. So I just typed, that on the root I want to see the search, and it wasn't there. So generate the controller, generate the views, and then generate the very simple search form for typing the name. And then when you submit it, it fails. So I had to point the form tag to a different controller action. So I did that, and then implement this action at first just to show, okay, here's the report for Andrzej, for example, but still didn't call the real report from my Ruby script. And only after all of this was working, so the Rails application itself was working, then I tried to, what I need to do in order to make it to work. And I was focused mostly so that it works instead of, whether it's pretty for now. So I actually, in the controller itself, I typed require relative ... and CSV importer. And the CSV importer has a constructor which takes one argument, which is the mapping of the talents. So I initialize that in the controller. It should be in the service object, and probably later will be in service object. I'm still not sure whether what would be the ideal architecture according to my current understanding. I'm pretty sure this application sooner or later will be like domain-driven design and CQRS and event sourcing. But right now I'm just driven by what I need in the user interface instead of the architecture. So in the controller, I just type csv importer.new.import all people and the path name to the file, the CSV file, and then I have finding, like, I have this method called, now I have the collection of all people, and then I can just, brute force and search who shares 5 strands, 4 strands, and I have all those methods already implemented. So in the end, I didn't need that much. What was a bit cumbersome was to generate the report. So previously I had the reporting code as part of the testing code actually. And that was just, a bunch of puts so that I can see it in the console and copy and paste from the console to Facebook. So now I just copy and pasted the bunch of code with the put statements, replaced them with a method called append to report, which just generates one string. And then I just put this string as a pre-tag on the website so that it's easy to copy paste and I don't have to bother about the end lines. And this way now I have this working on the web app. So 40 minutes of work and all these problems. So the problems I've had was that because I'm using require relative and I'm actually accessing a file which Rails doesn't know about because of autoloading. And I hate Rails autoloading. That's probably a good topic for another discussion, whether we need Rails autoloading overall. But overall, the problem was that after each change, when I was running this, debugging this, I restarted the server and ran it again to make sure that I'm running the right Rails code base. So actually Rails autoloading it's more disturbing me here than helping me here. Would prefer to just disable it overall. But the goal was achieved. I have it running locally. I'm not sure what's the next goal. As I said, this is a side project, nothing, no pressure here. But probably pushing this into Heroku would be the next step. Also, I don't want to make the CSV file part of the repository. And if I integrate, as I usually do, GitHub with Heroku, that will be needed. So I probably need some code which first takes the data from the CSV file, puts it into the database. So I need to create some data tables, Rails models probably, and then make them part of the application. This is probably a bigger step. Ideally, I would like not to do it, but on the other hand, I don't want to make the CSV files part of the repository because they contain some personal data which probably it shouldn't be distributed anywhere. So that's and then I imagine that there will be another place in the web application where we can just click import the CSV file, or maybe I would actually implement maybe the other route, the other path is to implement the Google API, accessing the Google spreadsheets so that we're always dynamically accessing the Google spreadsheet. It would be slow, but for such small needs, it doesn't matter really. And that would actually, it wouldn't require the step of downloading the Google spreadsheet as a CSV. So that's probably the best simplification I can follow on right now, and so that would be probably a good next step. Maybe before I go to Heroku, implement the Google API. So you see that the goals are changing dynamically even when I'm telling this to you. I just want to share how this application gets created. Maybe it will be helpful for someone, but also I hope it will be helpful for me so that I can retrieve the history of the project and some of the decisions made and some of the ordering here. Because I really want to learn from my own lessons, whether I'm taking good small steps. This is one of my focuses recently on any project, whether we improve the project in small steps instead of 1 week features or something like that. And thanks for listening. See you, hear you in the next episode.